Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another edition of StarSound Speaks. This is your host, Irlianna Samsara, with episode 164. And I have with me the very lovely Elodie St-Onge-Aubut. Yay! I'm so glad my dad told me to take French in high school. Thank you, Dad. Thank you. Anyway, hello, Elodie.
Hi, nice to meet you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've been on this warpath to have, that full moon in Libra. It was like right on my Jupiter, and I was like, no, and I went all over the world. I'm like really cool astrologers, and you passed. So
I feel honored. Thank you very much. Yeah, I saw your episodes, and you have a lot of interesting people on here. So very honored. Thank you.
Well, I am grateful that you're joining us, because I know the things you had to say on your website and on other podcasts were really fascinating to me, and it was just took astrology in a whole nother direction of discussion. So that's what I wanted to share with everybody today. What we're going to talk about is, first I always do, how did you find astrology? How did that come into your life? Because everybody's got a really cool origin story. And then we can go into, I'm really intrigued by this concept that you talked about, the age of the internet and astrology, and the age of 24-hour light, and how you studied the ancients, and then how you're pondering how all that played in. But now we've got, for the last 200 years, the light bulb and 24-hour light. And then I think about light pollution, and and what does that do to our soul and our psyche? And I think it's a really timely conversation right now, with Uranus we're in eclipse season, and with Uranus playing such an important part of these Taurus Scorpio eclipses for the next 12 months. I think it's a super relevant conversation. So I'm grateful to have you share your wisdom with us. So
yeah,
anyway, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I'm open to take this anywhere. I mean, I'm into the philosophy of light and darkness as an astrologer, so very glad to be able to discuss that.
Yeah, the deep stuff. I love that.
Yeah.
We want juice. All right, so see, Leo's is not just the show. We can also be,
the cheerleader.
Yeah, the cheerleader of depth.
Philosophical cheerleader.
Philosophical cheerleader, right? Oh gosh, give me that varsity sweater. All right, so yeah, so how did you find astrology? I mean, gosh, what did you do in your early life, and how did you find yourself here?
I think like a lot of teenager, I was just into runes and cards and astrology. So when I was 15, 16, I got into a lot of divination, and it was kind of just like a side hobby forever. And then when I turned 30, my Saturn returned, I actually was studying my own birth chart and was reading Joseph Campbell it was an astrologer who used Joseph Campbell Follow Your Bliss for delineating like something that I had in the ninth house. And so I was like, follow my bliss. And then I realized that like I was doing astrology all the time, and it was really a bliss for me. And so that's when I decided to actually go to school for it. And I just Googled schools online, and then really seriously took on that path. So prior to my Saturn return, it was definitely like just like a calling, but I hadn't identified it. So through the understanding of my own chart, I realized that I should be studying astrology.
Right. It was always right. We say transformation, it's always right in front of you.
Yeah, it's hard to be self-aware. You think you're self-aware, but you're so in like navel gazing that you're completely blind to yourself.
Right. Yeah. Blind spot.
Yeah, exactly. So it's something I've done basically all my life, and then eventually just decide to seriously can take it. And it's a vocation, so I always specify, there's work and then there's vocation, and sometimes you don't make money with your vocation, sometimes you do. So I was a cook for 20 years also, as a supplement, and then eventually I became an astrologer full time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very cool. Hellenistic, evolutionary astrology. You've studied different disciplines.
Yeah, the evolutionary astrology, I think, came like very early, just because that was a lot of the books from the 60s that were available, you know, psychological and symbolic and evolutionary, karmic, all of that. So that's a lot of the kind of material that was available when I was younger. And then I studied archetypal astrology with nightlight astrology, and then went in. I think any astrologer, when you start to study, you eventually end up into the traditional form, because that's sort of the root of the practice. So, you know, you just end up into the source material, which is Hellenistic traditional. And then beyond, for me, it didn't stop there. I'm really, really interested in archeoastronomy. So it's a branch of archaeology where people are actually conceptualizing how ancient Paleolithic people used astronomy, obviously in tandem with astrology, most likely, to situate themselves. So there's actually a great book here, and there's no English equivalent. I'm always researching, but there's this
the cave drawings, Lascaux et le ciel de la
préhistoire. So
the sky of the prehistoric peoples.
Yeah, and
your dog is approving.
Yeah. And so basically, I don't know if you're familiar with the lunar calendars of the Paleolithic era, but the small bone fragments that they discovered everywhere, dating from 350,000 years ago to maybe 25,000 years ago, where it tells us that ancient people were tracking the movement of the moon for a very, very long time. In this book here, her theory is that the people who did these drawings were aware of the precession of the equinox.
Wow.
Although we attribute the precession of the equinox to the Greeks, like the discovery of the precession. So that places the, you know, humans knowing about the precession of the equinox way earlier.
Like 10,000 years or something, right?
20,000 years earlier. Wow. So although
it makes ancient Greek and Egyptian wisdom look like yesterday, considering, yeah, exactly.
So it's traditional Hellenistic astrology is quite modern considering our history. So yeah, so I'm really into like the really more ancient forms, and you know, there's no writing, there's nothing, so we can only go by the archaeology and the artifacts that are being found.
Yeah, and let them speak to us.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Wow, very, very cool. So about this, the age of astrology in the age of life. In the age of light, light, and it has to do with life and the quality of life. Yeah, let's go there. What is what drew you to that? Or you definitely are a contemplative philosopher. Can't talk today. Hello. Wait till next week when Mercury's completely stationed retrograde. Sorry. No, not sorry. It's just we're having fun with it. No, so yeah, I know, I love how you contemplate philosophically these ideas. So what is it about astrology in the age of the internet that draws you? What is it that engages you and maybe upsets you or has you concerned or some kind of state of wonderment?
Well, I think every professional astrologer right now is coming against these questions, because most of our practice is happening online, which is really good because we're forming community. I'm meeting you today. I would have never known about you without the internet. So in terms of, you know, having a community as astrologer, I think it's amazing and it's very connective. But as for the practice itself, you know, there's a lot of question. There's a lot of ethical question because the practice is not regulated. So that's one thing. Anybody can improvise themselves. And then more extensively, I think we're using softwares to locate the planets. So we're not really engaging with the sky as much, which, you know, astrology is the science of light. Fundamentally, it's looking at the sun rising and setting. That's what humans have been doing forever. But as we move into this 24-hour daylight, blue screen, I'm really questioning what's the impact on the physiological level, because the study of astrology is how the correlation between the movement of the planet and our experience. But is our experience changing because of our experience of light? And these questions started coming through because I was doing a research project with the moon and the lunar mansion. So, you know, just tracking the lunar cycle every month and just looking at it visually and contextualizing like where I'm located, looking at it and stuff. And also just taking note on how it's affecting me biologically, how it's affecting my dream, how it's affecting my emotional state and stuff. But then I started to realize, I'm like, it's a little bit different because nighttime is not necessarily nighttime anymore for us. And it hasn't for, you know, maybe 50, 60 years, more so with television and then now with the screen and stuff. So I do think people are overstimulated with the light. And our nervous system are really, you see a lot of talk online too about nervous system and regulating the nervous system and stuff. I do think it's related to the light. And you know, in astrology, the simplest thing to start with is the moon, because the moon cycle is so fast, right? It takes 30 days. It's easy to track, and it's very connected to our body and how we feel. And just with that, we can see that there's a lot of change that is happening at a profound level. So what does it mean for us humans? Like not only for the practice of astrology, but what does it mean? How are we changing physically because of this light that we're constantly looking at?
How are we changing? Because people may not even realize that they're, you know, it can be such a suck and we don't realize what it's doing to us.
Well, we're social creature, and we're really, you know, we're geared towards community. So it's nice to have access to the world and all of that. So it's very connective. So it's fulfilling that need, which I think we crave. And it's, you know, people, it offers all sorts of opportunity and stuff like that. But yeah, on the physiological level, I do think it's really problematic because we're ingesting so much image, so much light. How is that affecting our psyche and our body and our physiognomy? And I'm like, are we going to be completely transformed? Are we on our way to becoming like a different kind of human because of 24-hour daylight? And then more extensively, what does that mean for the practice of astrology? Obviously, if we only use computer and we don't need to correlate how we feel to the movement of the planet anymore, we're just using sort of an abstract model online.
Right, it becomes so abstract.
It becomes abstract. We're moving into the air, period.
Right.
Where we're just like moving information around and using information and kind of like building different kind of structures, virtual structures, and we can apply different type of meaning. It seems to me that it's just less, well, it's obviously less organic. But then you can also do more things. So I mean, I don't say necessarily it's fundamentally bad, but on a physiological level at this point, this sort of conjuncture that we find ourselves, I do think that there's some major issue with like people's nervous system and the inability to regulate themselves, because the social platform online are geared to keep our attention.
Right. And it like, yeah, it's geared. And maybe we could phrase it as, you know, it costs us something. So it's not about like good, bad, taking it out of that matrix, but it costs, what does it cost us? And what I hear you saying is, you know, what it costs us is that organic connection, which has existed since time immemorial with people looking at the stars. And yeah, and I think too, you know, I would like to see that this Uranus in the mix with the Taurus Scorpio eclipses is this alarm bell that's saying, wait a minute, you know, whistle, maybe we need to rethink this. And sometimes unfortunately it could take a catastrophic event like an earthquake or whatever to shake people out of that comfort zone and reground them with real earth.
Yeah, the grounding there is really, it's a good word to use, grounding. I do think that people are looking for grounding. But at the same time, a lot of us now are making a living online because of the last 2 years. So a lot of people are relying on these platforms, and it's really hard to regulate also, to regulate yourself, to be like, okay, you know, especially if you're working for yourself or you're working online, it's just this permanent experience. And I do think it's affecting our nervous system. I think people are kind of cornered, like they're back into a corner at this point. And I did like a survey online to ask people, what do you think is more addictive, Instagram, or what do you think is harder to quit, cigarette or Instagram? And actually it was
Instagram.
Most people said Instagram.
Wow.
So you know, apart from the light aspect as professional astrologer and using light and darkness in our practice, just the human experience, you know, of that is really, it's a compulsive thing. It's something that we have a really hard time regulating. And the images on our eyes too, constant images, so many images, you know, and fundamentally, yeah. And I mean, astrology arose from the sun rising. That's why the ascendant is so important. That's where the sun rises. It represents the east. It doesn't need to be complicated. It's very, very simple. But I do think it becomes this complicated web with the internet, which is nice because you can do more complex form of astrology, like astrological magic and stuff. But yeah, on a more physiological level, which is very important, like people are losing their energy, I do think, online.
Yeah, we are definitely at a choice point. And when I think about Uranus ruling the internet and AI, just AI in general, you know, it's like, oh yeah. It's funny, it's strange, but last week I interviewed Michael Bartlett, and he said, and I meant to get back to this because it was a very shocking statement. He said, wait, in the beginning of the conversation, he said, you know, look at this Uranus and Taurus, people are marrying robots.
Yes. Like,
oh yeah. God.
Yes. But I do think that weaves into the air period that we're just moving into, and robot takeover that we might see. Another astrologer that MJ Patterson, she's in Nova Scotia, she basically compares the air period that we're just moving into for the next 200 years to like robot takeover. But not to be, I do think AI has its place, you know. I think like, but is it replacing our thinking function stuff? Like, also thinking of the older generation of astrologer who always say, oh, the younger generation is amazing, but you can create like 50 charts in 3 hours. It took us all day to write one chart.
Right.
So the amount of information we're assimilating is more. Eventually, does that mean that humans become obsolete? That's another big question in terms of astrology. If AI can write horoscopes, if AI can replace like the role of thinkers, and
it won on Jeopardy. It won the, you know.
Did it? I didn't see that.
A couple of years ago. They put a robot with, was it Ken Jennings, the big Jeopardy champ, or somebody, but it beat the top person. So that is definitely alarming.
Yeah, I mean, these are all things that I think are coming very quickly down the pipeline. So the status quo right now, where we find ourselves as astrologers online practicing, I do think is going to change a lot in the next 5-6 years with the advent of AI. AI are writing articles online now. A lot of people hire, they don't hire AI, but they use AI to write simple articles on topics and stuff. So as a horoscope writer myself, I do wonder if my job will not become obsolete as AI able to just do astrology, quickly.
That's so creepy. And it's like, then we don't need astrologers, right? If that's where that's going.
Well, the pendulum of that, I do think, and that's why I'm asking myself these questions and also like kind of throwing it out there, is that how can we return to just more organic, natural relationship with the light? Everybody knows that it's better to turn your phone off an hour before you go to bed so that you can have like a real good night of sleep, because your body and your circadian rhythm needs that. Most people experience insomnia. That's because the blue light, the LED from your screen, is telling you that it's daytime. So those are all very simple, basic things, but it's just all permeating. So I do think it's pushing people to return again to more simple things. So
yeah, I looked at the I said this earlier when we were chatting in the email. There was the Bing search page. Every day they have a beautiful picture and image, and I always like to see the picture. And it was a picture of, it was International Dark Sky. I don't know if May is International Dark Sky Month, but the whole dark sky movement has been very prevalent in the last few decades, and especially now. And they said that now 83% of the world's population is living under light pollution.
Yeah, I saw that when you sent my dad. Yeah, but at the same time, we don't. So if humans evolve using the cycle of the light and darkness to survive, because fundamentally that's what it was, but we don't need it to survive anymore because we're so intertwined inside the technology and the systems, that like really it has to be like a voluntary kind of thing that happens, because we're not dependent so much.
Right.
We're not,
right.
I mean, the sun rising and setting for thousands of years meant survival, but at this point right now with our big cities and stuff, like, and we can grow food in like greenhouse or like different setup. So it's a weird period. That's why for me it's like such a crazy thing to think about. Like electricity was only discovered like a few hundred years ago. We're still experiencing this like turning point as humans, and it seems like a long time ago, but in retrospect, maybe in 1,000 years from now, they'll be like, oh, this whole period when they discovered electricity, that's when our body changed, that, or who knows what. But I think it's people underestimate, because we use electricity every day, but underestimate the impact that electricity will have on our physiology.
Yeah, I know that they said that kids, who are always they grew up in this generation of, this whole generation of kids never knew anything but the internet. I'm old enough to that was not the case. And but
same here. Yeah,
it's like, I tell people, there used to be this thing called pay phones, and they're like, what's that? I'm like, you put a coin in, and
I have nostalgia for pre-internet sometime. Like I find myself and my friends having nostalgia for the time where you made a plan on Friday night and there was no way of knowing, because you didn't have cell phone, and it was like Friday night, that's what's happening,
Right. Yeah, it is. It can be, it definitely, we're at that place where it is nostalgic to think, wow, we didn't have call waiting. When I grew up, we didn't have call waiting on the landline. People now are like, what's a landline?
Now we're just constantly accessible, constantly reachable, but it makes us really compulsive in terms of checking our phones constantly and working constantly and constantly being geared in this kind of mode.
When you think about AI and like, it's become like an exterior brain, so to speak. It's like this outside brain, and like, what does it do to our wonderful natural organic brain that never needed that? And so it's this clash, it's like.
On a positive note, I would like to say though that I do believe that the internet is simply a metaphor for our interconnectedness.
Yes.
And what I found is that the telepathic occurrence with people I've never met, and the connection with people I've never met really is revealing that interconnectedness. You know, like we can sense each other because of the internet. So it's kind of showing us already our pre-existing interconnectedness, and it's accelerating, I think, our capacity to be connected and to feel connected, and maybe to communicate across boundaries, just like telepathically, talking about like another side of Uranus, you know. We do send electrical impulses, and there is a lot more that is not visible. And I do think that the internet is a beautiful metaphor for that. That's why also like focusing where you're focusing your attention on the internet is simply an extension also. So you want to be very selective with what you're consuming.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's really super important, because that's our consciousness. It's affecting our consciousness, what we consume. And certainly it almost seems like it's amped up more when it's the internet, because if it was just you consuming in your own home in a book, you know, or whatever, that's so radically different than taking it online, and all it just steps everything up, you know, exponentially. So yeah.
It reminds me of like the quick synapses of neurons, you know. It's like I'm sending a text message, and the person answers me. And but I do experience so much more synchronicity with others also because of it. It's almost like it really augments our interconnectedness. That's how I've been conceptualizing it anyway.
I know when we just, you know, went through this whole, you know, Jupiter Neptune conjunction, and, you know, Venus was there, and, you know, just all that we've been through in the last couple of months, and with that Neptune conjunction, and I could feel it, you know. I mean, because we all, as astrologers, we were aware that this would be happening, where you'd have that feeling of oneness, and there was all this, really, it was more heightened synchronicity. I'd be thinking about something, and I get a text from somebody,
Yes,
exactly that message, you know.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's maybe one other thing of the air period that I'm wondering about, is if we're not going to become a little bit more like the antenna that we are, you know, because of this augmentation of the electricity and the internet and stuff like that.
I like to think that we it's like we already are the, you know, our brains and all, we are the we'll call, I don't know, better, for lack of a better phrase, we are like the natural internet, like that. The internet that we see is really there's nothing like the natural brain to do that. And it's like, hey, we can rely on that, and we will have to, because gosh, you know, Uranus in Taurus, you know, with these eclipses, man, you know, and they talk about the grid, the infrastructure, and the electric grid in different countries, you know, they're being alarmed at and keeping it in place. And what if a sun flares on the sun, you know, they can knock out grids, you know. And even California, when Uranus first went into Taurus in May of 2018, gosh, it's been 4 years now. But they talked about rolling blackouts, and how people may have to just like new normal, and that all these creature comforts that you thought, you know, you automatically just, you know, turn on your faucet and you have water. It's like, well, you know what, maybe it's not going to be like that. And we could be seeing that for sure, that you know, break.
Self-sufficiency is a big, I always attribute self-sufficiency to Mars, and then more extensively to the Scorpio-Taurus axis. And I do think Uranus also has some kind of self-sufficient signature to it, because Uranus wants to do its own thing. It doesn't want to rely on the status quo. So I do think that we're seeing more and more people who are like, okay, well, I'm going to take the matter into my own hand. I'm going to grow food. I'm going to, because the system is becoming less and less reliable. So there is like the dream of the 60s of self-sufficiency is kind of continuing at this point. I do find that, especially with Uranus and Taurus now.
Yeah, and some of it is we're just being, forced to reckon with these because we've just been this profligate spending and, raping the earth for creature comfort and all of that we, with the environment and the way we, factory farming, meat production, factories, spraying Roundup and, glyphosate. And, there's that toll that we're now, we got the bill for it now with the Taurus Scorpio eclipses. It's like, okay, now what are we going to do? Well, let's reinvent ourselves and our relationship with the earth.
It's interesting because it's almost like every time we try to adjust, it creates other problems. It seems, for a very long time that we're kind of on this ecological journey, because I was learning about like recycling when I was 5-6 years old. And I do wonder, like, all of the lab created meats and stuff and plant-based meat, if it's not going to create other sort of issues also on the side, I do think there's something about just like basics, like just returning to basic, which is also contradictory because we are, with the social media and stuff, an influencer, we see the life of the rich and famous very, very, it's almost like we're living with them. You see influencers online. Instagram is really problematic for that because you see people who are extremely rich, and it's just, it seems so accessible and stuff. And I do think the divide between, like, there's middle class disappearing and the divide is getting wider and wider. So although we're getting more ecological, I do think that excess is also happening to like an insane level. Like, and that's the question, is it just human nature to want to have things and want to consume and want, even though we're aware that like there's destruction, everybody's ordering online, Amazon is very quick, so we're still consuming and producing things, even though we have the impression of maybe being more ecologically inclined. Are we really? Because the consuming culture online is crazy. You just press a button and you get whatever you want, just like that.
And I think too, when you mentioned about watching these, celebrity reality shows of the, these gorgeous homes and such, and it's like people living vicariously. If they can't have that multi-million-dollar home, then they get their shot of it, their fix, by watching this computer screen, and they're watching this show, and it's like it puts them in that world, but then they don't have any real connection with it, and it's almost like getting a fix.
Yeah, and also I do think that a lot of young people think that they can aspire to that it's accessible, that it should be given to them. I do see a lot of that, like I mean, and I think that's fundamentally human nature, but when you're exposed to that every day on social media, it's almost like, I do think a lot of people aspire to that kind of materialism. I think that's just part of the human condition. And I wonder, in our effort to consume less and to become more self-reliant, if parallel to that, just the exposure from social media to like the life of the rich and famous, like all these stars that just have like social media account and they're just posing like by the pool with their fancy clothes. All the young people, they really think they can aspire to that. So it's making a generation of people, like you were saying, the younger generation who grew up with the internet, it's just making a generation of young people who don't know anything else. It's the reality they live in, even though it's not reality.
It's not reality, right?
Yeah. So gosh. Yeah, but in terms of Uranus and Taurus, I do think it's gonna, regardless, it's gonna bring some surprises, and yeah, like obviously food shortage and all of that a lot of astrologers have predicted. So it's gonna force us to think about like the essential and simplifying. I do think that.
And just, the words that come to mind is, you think that's glamour, with like, you see people at, with these long nails and they're and all this stuff, my God, the nails nowadays, they're getting like, how do you type? How do you type on a keyboard or your phone with these I don't know.
I would totally have nails if I had nothing else to do.
I have no use for those things. It just bothers me. Oh, I have to have short nails. But yeah, just when you, maybe it's about a new, like maybe the Uranus and Taurus signature, and again being very loud with the eclipse season, is saying, let me show you a new form of glamour. Maybe real glamour is like you know what I love to do, Elodie? Every morning I love to go out in the sunshine in the early morning and facing the east, and I look at the trees. There's a beautiful tree that's very close to my patio door, and I look at the sun through the look at the leaves, that the sun is coming through the leaves, and it's a bright emerald green color, and I just love to just do this eye meditation, and I just like consciously open my eye chakras and like let
I'm coming over tomorrow morning.
Yeah, come on over.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah, you're always welcome. But the I need some French practice, so you have to come,
Okay.
And I will not speak English for a month, and I will just be immersed, and I will then come out. But anyway, yeah, if you do that, it's really cool. And then that green light is like consciously coming into my body, and it's like flooding me, and it feels so good just on an energetic level. That connection. I stand barefoot as much as I can. All right, warm weather, obviously it's something that all of us can do, but we have to wait for the warmer weather. But even when it's cold in the winter, even if it's 2 minutes, I'll go out with bare feet, and and I think another thing with Uranus and Taurus is get used to the like take cold showers, try like oh, these things that you're like, oh God, I can't stand it. It's like go in and just be with it and come out the other end, and you have a different view of these things. But anyway, yeah, that's what this and it could be a little forced, or it could just be this aha moment. It could be all of it, of us saying, we have a different view of glamour. Maybe glamour and beauty it's not, Kim Kardashian's 100 new outfits and red nails, or that we want to aspire to that. How about if we aspire to looking at that green light coming through the sun and feeling that earth under our feet.
I think you expressed like a spiritual fundamental principle that happiness is not found in material, like in seeking material things, although it can bring like temporary. I think like that's kind of the spiritual principle of most faith, and most spiritual tradition. Is just that we tend to forget. That's what I was saying. I think it's the human condition. But yeah, with this Taurus eclipse and Uranus and Taurus, I think it's like an amazing moment to get rich with that, with what is there already, with life, just like with the existence, with the embodiment. Like that's really, you're filling yourself with that. Like you're filling your bank account,
Yeah, I love that. Get rich with the get rich. Yeah, you can get rich quick. That's Taurus.
But it's a state of mind. Wealth is a state of mind, and I always remind myself that. That's from my dad. And being rich, wealthy is a state of mind. That's all it is. It has nothing to do with your bank account.
It is a state of mind. And maybe these eclipses are showing us, like, you to get rich quick, yeah, you can. And our notion of what rich is definitely getting shifted. And it's an invitation to see wealth. Like you said, it is a state of mind. And it's not about the material bling, but it is about the material. Like, look at that beauty in that leaf, and look at the wealth that I received just looking at green leaves on trees. I mean, to me, I'm so grateful that I have trees around me. There are people who live in these cement, in cities with cement everywhere, and you don't see much green. And it's like, wow, I get to look at all these green trees, and that's a wealth. Oh, your dog agrees with me. Thank you. I didn't tell him to say that.
it's funny because we're talking about Taurus and stuff, and there's farmers bringing manure in the meadows around here for the spring fields, and
Wow.
he's being exposed to that. But yeah, I do think like in terms of the Scorpio Taurus axis, I was wondering about it a lot just as an astrologer and stuff, and I do think there's a certain aspect about simplicity and returning to simplicity and simplifying what feels overly complicated, and the human, oh my goodness, sorry.
That's okay. This is an inclusive podcast. We include all of it. He has some important things he's trying to share with us.
It's like Uranus and Taurus unpredictability.
Right.
But yeah, the human experience in like Buddhism, they say like fundamentally samsara, like our reality is sort of illusion, and we are here to understand the essential, and it isn't a good opportunity to do that, to return to these kind of essential principle that like you're gonna get lost in material reality. You're gonna get lost if you go too deep and into your desires and want. You're gonna lose the plot. You're gonna lose the essential. You're gonna lose the essential core of what you're looking for, which is just presence and embodiment.
I love that. That's really important. I love that's a huge message for us. Yeah.
Because we're never going to get everything we want. There's always something wrong. There's always more that we want because we're almost there. If only I had that, then I would be happy.
Yeah, it's like this hamster wheel.
But it's a fundamental human condition, but we forget. And I do think also that like the quick access with stuff online and being exposed to people who are like lounging by the Mediterranean and stuff, we just forget that that's not really where it's at. We're like aspiring to all of these things. Maybe they can come to us, but fundamentally we also need to be embodied and present. And even if you had all that, there would be something else. It's like so simple, and it's like the fundamental of all the mystical texts, but we still get lost in overcomplicating because of our desired nature. Mm-hmm. Which I think is like the Scorpio the Scorpio is very hungry. It wants to just consume. Yeah. And I mean, Taurus also, it's a very like, it's the axis of desire. It's ruled by Mars and Venus. Mars and Venus is desires,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's like, what consumes you? Let's take a look. What's consuming? You think you're being consumed by this, but you're really, look over here.
Yeah. And I don't think there's anything wrong with desiring. I think it's beautiful. It makes, we create art in the process. We create literature and all sorts of beautiful things. But also if it consumes you, it can make you very unhappy. Yeah. Because you feel like you're not getting what you want. And then you're not looking at the leaves and soaking in the emeralds. You could have all the emeralds of the world every morning. They're right there.
Yeah, they're right outside. I just water them a little bit.
Yeah, I saw it when you were describing it. I imagined the sun passing through the leaves and stuff, and it's beautiful practice. Obviously it's not gonna put food on the table, but
it's free.
It's free, and you're already starting the day from a better place. You're not starting the day from a place of lack, let's say.
Yeah. And the green, if you think about like, wealth, that to me is wealth consciousness. And if you live in like the Pacific Northwest where there's not a lot of sun, that's okay. Whatever light comes through, just, we work with that, and the play of light and dark and sun, and I don't know, whatever it is that floats your boat, just to focus on some aspect of nature and enjoying that and
breathing, the simple act of breathing. I mean, that's like something we forget. And just returning to the nervous system and our experience of the internet, I think most people are just breathing very, very shallow. I'm experiencing that. I'm aware of that. And I still am just like because it's so fast and the internet is so fast. I'm in nature, I live off grid. I'm still like, you know, a lot of people say, oh, you're lucky you're off grid. I want to be off grid in nature, but I'm still experiencing stress, and I'm still experiencing the dysregulation of my breathing.
Yeah, that is a huge one.
Yeah, I think like it's not when we get this or that. It's like it's right now.
It's right now, and in the breath, and yeah, I was just going to say, oh yeah, you know, what's coming to me is that the breath is, you know, you talk about wealth consciousness and shifting consciousness, because people who are highly conscious have a very powerful relationship with their breath, and a very conscious relationship. So, you know, I've said this many times in the different podcasts here, is that pranayama is so, with that Uranus and Taurus, it's like, come on, you know, pranayama, man, what a door. You talk about wealth, and you want to talk about the riches of what's inside you, and conscious breathing. And there's so many kinds. You go on the internet, you can find a million of them, you know, or just breathe you don't have to even do a formal breathing. But just being conscious of it and coming back to the breath is you know, what the words that are coming to me is like, breath is wealth.
Yeah, and I think like with the Taurus exit, like with the North Node and Taurus, with Uranus and Taurus and stuff, it's like it's as simple as that. I do think after the pandemic fatigue and the trauma of the last 2 years, people are just looking to just like, I just want simple. I want to be in my 5 senses. I want to experience, you know, we're not looking for complicated things here. We're kind of traumatized. We want to just like health, organic, you know, juicy.
Right. And that breath, man, it doesn't matter what climate you're in, even if you're surrounded by concrete. If you're listening to this podcast and you're in a city and you're like, oh gosh, I don't really have access, we can go to a park. But even if you can't, even if you're in prison, like, we take it down to the most extreme place, it's like, you have your breath. You know, there are people who become fully self-realized in solitary confinement in prison cells. There's
What's his name actually?
stories.
This guy Damien, I can't remember his name, but yeah, that's what happened to him.
It's like all he had was his breath. You know, it's like, all right,
And
everything is taken away from me, and it's
he
just you and your
developed
breath.
like, yeah, he developed all sorts of skills and eventually was found not guilty and came out and wrote about his experience. But he developed all of these spiritual practice while he was in prison because he had nothing else. I don't
There's
think it's
nothing else.
yeah, I mean, I like in terms of like where we find ourselves with this cycle of eclipse, I do think that there are a lot of things that has been taken away. Maybe other things will be taken away from us, like mobility with the price of gas and accessibility to food and stuff. So yeah, we need to find like other ways to we need to find other ways to exist. It's not like just coasting like we always did.
Right. Yeah. Coasting's over.
Coasting's over. Yeah, it really feels like that.
Yeah. We don't get to coast anymore.
Well, we can coast like the breath and all of these simple things.
Yeah. Coast on that. We'll take coasting and move it to another place.
Yeah. And with Taurus, it's the 5. I always say it's return to the 5 senses. Like, everybody has to eat. It's about like enjoyment of our senses, of taste, of smell, of touch. It's accessible.
It's like, yeah, I remember years ago when I got on a more disciplined yogic path, and I remember this one day I did like 2 hours of yoga asanas, and I remember, and you don't know my eating habits, but my friends do. I love to eat, and people are like, oh, you're so thin. How do you? I love to eat. You know, it's like, I know in my chart why I love to eat. I can see it, but that, you know, I burn it off, the calories up quickly. But I remember feeling so high from all this deep asana and breathing, and I created this current, this, you know, this like bhav, and it just went for hours, and I did not have hunger for like 6 hours.
Oh, that's amazing.
I was just riding that thing, and like I said, that's a big breakthrough, especially for me who loves to eat. Yeah. I transcended that appetite channel, so to speak. And wow, that's what's available, so breathing and breath work, and wow, it definitely opens doors that it blew me away. I never forgot that. It was many years ago, but yeah, so these are things that are really, I think that we're at that portal now where these ideas they're right in front of us. And it's like, okay, here's a choice point. What are you going to do when, there's food shortage, or we already see some of that with the supply chain? Well, who are we going to be? What we rely on ourselves, Taurus.
Yeah, and Taurus Scorpio axis is very real too. I wonder how that's going to transpire as the year progresses and Mars stations retrograde later in October. I do think it's like a very real axis, so it brings us in contact with our reality, like in a real way. It's like it's like if there's dissatisfaction and things that are not working, it's going to be really, really obvious. It's not so mutable, let's say, like the Virgo Pisces axis, where it could be maybe more, I don't know, fluid or something. They're fixed signs. They're anything that's very grounded and rooted, it's.
Oh, I want my comfort zone. I want my MTV.
Yeah.
Now what are you gonna do?
Yeah, exactly. But it is the axis of desire, and I do see it in consultation. People, we want, we need, and it's just very obvious, and it's interesting in contrast to the internet, where everything seems that we can get it very quickly.
This Mars is going to be Mars will translate the eclipse point. I want to say, I wrote it down. It's earlier in July. I want to say around the 10th. And then with these subjects coming up again, July will be really hot. And then with July and the North Mars, I just want to say this in closing, like Mars and the North Node conjunct with Uranus. All three, all three amigos. Woo! Yep. First of all, like judging the three amigos.
Yeah. That's gonna be interesting. I don't necessarily think it's like as malefic as what we have seen in Capricorn in late 2020.
Right. Well, Mars is going to be in Taurus, and that's in its so-called exile. But I see that as a good thing. It's like, good, let Mars hang out in Venus's temple, because there's a whole new opportunity here.
Yeah, I like that. I do. Yeah, and it's not Pluto and Saturn. It's a different thing. Pluto and Saturn brought the lockdowns and brought sickness and stuff. Yeah. So but I do think there's it's a completely different kind of thing now. North Node is with Uranus and Mars is definitely not going to be the most relaxing oasis.
Relaxing in some other dimension, but not in the one we're used to.
But maybe, and that's why also I was kind of reinstating the importance of regulating the nervous system, because as we see these Uranus signatures through this year, being triggered and stuff, like the more able you're to regulate your system, the better you are to deal with anything that comes through. I actually found a book last night. I was just like in used bookstore, and I found the full catastrophe living.
Using the wisdom of Full Catastrophe Living is the title. I'm saying this for people on the audio part of the podcast. Using the subtitle is Using the Wisdom of Your Body and Mind to Face Stress, Pain, and Illness. And the author's name is Jon Kabat-Zinn, Z-I-N-N, PhD. Wow.
But I thought the catastrophe was a good word in some ways. I mean, Uranus is not necessarily catastrophe, but Uranus is unpredictability. And as we are not sure about rising price and food and what are we going to do, and is this a good idea and stuff like that, I do think it's returning to the body and regulating yourself and your nervous system and your breathing will allow you to do pretty much anything at that from that standpoint, from a place that's kind of centered and grounded. So yeah, I thought, I mean, this was written a long time ago now, and we can find all of this stuff online, but I do think mindfulness is really important, even more so when we find ourselves in like Uranian times.
Yeah, for sure. I remember years ago, I remember thinking there will come a day when all that we will have left is our breath and our integrity.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, integrity is another really important word, I think, to both Scorpio and Taurus axis. Loyalty, integrity.
Yeah.
Part of the simplification process. Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that.
Yeah, simplification. Yeah, that's what it is. It's all, the simpler. We love simple. There's a big world in simple, like the Buddhist koan poetry, you know, it's like that one line contains the whole universe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Returning to the essential.
Returning to the essentials.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That has been a really cool chat. I am so grateful that we were able to get together, Elodie. This is awesome.
Yeah.
How can people find you? Can you give us the name of your website?
Yeah, so my website is houseastrology.com, and I'm also on Instagram and Facebook, but I'm not super active at this point. My horoscope, I write monthly horoscope for Astrograph website, so my horoscope are they're very extensive horoscopes. So
Astrograph, and people can access them at astrograph.com.
Yeah, that's right. And yeah, otherwise, my website, everything's there.
Cool. And if they just put in, if they're not cool with their French and they can just get to Elodie, it's like melody without the M, right?
Yeah.
Elodie, Elodie, and they can Google that. I'm sure people can find you as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. It was an honor meeting you.
I know. I'd love to keep our chats. We'll have to come circle back again, and and then
we can do the reverse. I'll interview you.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Cool. Whatever. I'm game. Well, all right, guys. Well, yes, and thank you all for listening. And if you liked and found value with this, so please like, share, subscribe. It always helps the algorithm. We're so grateful for everybody. And yeah. Until next time, this is Irlianna Samsara with Elodie St-Onge-Aubut. Thank you so much for listening, and everybody have a really blessed day and blessed eclipse season. Namaste.
Namaste.
Yay, goodbye from StarSound Astrology for now. Au revoir, right? It means literally until next time. So,
or salut.
Or salut, right. All right, guys, take it easy. Bye for now.